Join me in the audio garden to cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. My name is Martha Senator. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard. Welcome back to the audio garden, my friends. A place where we slow the pace, flow with poetry, and get into the nitty-gritty of reading, writing, and publishing. Today, we'll be joined by Diane Goettel, Executive Director of Black Lawrence Press, an indie imprint based in New York. Later in the hour, we'll hear from authors with tables at the Author and Artisan Market in Travelers Rest at As the Page Turns Bookstore. And Professor Storm will return to walk and talk in the field in the audio garden. But first, let's take a little time for a poem. This is Michael Collonese reading at the Brandy Bar in Hendersonville, North Carolina, a poem called The Fish Crows of Kinvala.
First thing in the morning, you can hear their cries, and if you open an upstairs window to the wide, gray, Irish sky, you'll see them leaving their night roost on the red clay caps of chimneys to scratch the cobbled limestone key for crust of yesterday's bread that local fishermen save to feed them in the gesture of solidarity. Although mackerel nets rot on the docks and the engines of their worn-out wooden boats are silent as the cost of diesel fuel has made it unprofitable to put to sea.
This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator, taking an hour each week to be here in the audio garden with you to talk about reading and writing, listening and being heard. Tony Robles and I both talk to readers, poets, authors, booksellers, editors, and publishers. And our indie publishers are precious, as they represent a small but influential sector of the market where readers can find titles that conglomerate publishers are not interested in publishing, and emerging authors might find an opportunity. I'd like to welcome you, Diane Goettel, to the audio garden here during the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. You are the Executive Director of Black Lawrence Press. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's really a pleasure to have you here. Black Lawrence Press is in New York, and you have several contests that I'd like to talk about, but I wanted to just start with the names of them: Big Moose, Hudson, Hudson Valley, the Black River. And I wanted to find out how much of your identity as a press is involved with the Hudson Valley and vice versa, how much of it is part of Black Lawrence Press.
Sure. That's a really great question. So we are a very deeply rooted New York State press. We were founded actually in the Adirondack region, and the name of the press, the Black Lawrence Press, came from the St. Lawrence River and the Black River. The founder was living far, far upstate at the time of the founding. Now we are located in southern Westchester. I am in the Black Lawrence Press head office, which is also known as the Sunroom, in my home in Mount Vernon, New York. And we are just a click north of New York City. Mount Vernon shares a border with the Bronx.
What is the landscape for you there as an indie press? Are you one among many, would you say, or is it still a kind of scant landscape?
Well, there are over 400 small and independent presses in the United States. So we're kind of everywhere. New York State is certainly a creative and artistic hub for all sorts of endeavors. Literature, 3D art, uh, performing arts, of course. We have Broadway just down the road from where we are here. So there certainly is an abundance of literary organizations and literary presses that are in New York State. And it's a lovely sort of sisterhood of presses. When you go to something like the Harlem Book Fair, I was there last weekend, or the Brooklyn Book Fair, which is coming up at the end of the month, you just see table upon table, row upon row of people that are doing similar and wonderful work. The same was true over the summer when we were on Governor's Island for the New York City Poetry Festival. And there are micro presses that are run by one person working part-time who's doing hand-sewn chapbooks. And then there are presses like Black Lawrence Press. We're celebrating our 20th year. We have over 400 books in print. And so we are more established. We have a larger staff, a more dedicated group of people working towards the press.
So you've grown over the years, and you've grown up in this landscape of variety and maybe even competition. I don't think you regard it so much as competition, probably as being part of a landscape of literature. And I wonder, what is your identity as a press in terms of the types of things that you want to see published and that you put your heart into publishing?
Yeah, what we're always really looking for are thoughtful, important, and new writing and ideas from people who have something important to say. We certainly try to make sure that our list is diverse in many different directions in terms of not only, the ethnicity or nationality of our authors, but also the age of our authors, the background of our authors, whether or not they were able to go all the way and get an MFA and perhaps PhD in literature, or picked up a workshop here and there and sort of learned on their own. And so that's sort of our mandate as a press. And it's really interesting that you brought up competition, because I think that is probably very true when you get into the upper echelons of big five publishing, right? Where there's sort of a bloodbath for the next bestseller and who's going to win it at auction and which publisher is going to get it. It's so different, and it's so much more friendly in the small press world.
Mm.
We are really in a golden age of humans writing poems and stories and essays. There are so many people that do that work now. At Black Lawrence Press, we publish about 24 to sometimes 30 books a year, but we receive anywhere between 7 and 10,000 submissions. So there's really, in terms of, competition, when someone withdraws a manuscript that I had started getting excited about, and I hear that it's going to another small press that I really respect, I make a note, because I'll make sure to go over to their table at the Brooklyn Book Fair or AWP or the Southern Festival of the Book or wherever I'll be next, and get a copy. It's a much happier and communal ecosystem
Mm.
than other parts of the publishing world.
Interesting. So what you've described to me is that you're seeking really a variety, um, in every sense of the word. And so I wonder, though, again, is there something in particular that would identify Black Lawrence Press within that diversity, that you're doing that sets you apart as well from the other indie presses?
Uh, I would not say that, when it comes to our list, that there are a few adjectives that I can give you for the kinds of books that we publish.
Mm.
If you look at our list year after year, I think that you'll see, well, first of all, I can talk about the kinds of books that we publish. We publish chapbooks, both poetry and prose chapbooks, short story collections, poetry collections, novels, anthologies, and we are willing to take a risk in terms of the content that we publish, in terms of the genre. We publish a lot of hybrid work. Um, and so, but I do think that there are a lot of other small presses out there that are doing something similar to us, right? There are some
Uh-huh.
small presses that have sort of a theme or a mandate, right? There are presses that specifically publish, authors of a specific background, or they specifically publish, they only publish chapbooks or something like that. We have kind of a wider breadth than that, and we also have editors with quite a range of tastes. And when we're going through submissions pile, whether it's for our open reading period, and we have the next one coming up in November, or it's for a contest, we're really just looking for beautifully crafted writing by someone who has something important to say. And a lot of times people say, well, when do you know that you want to publish a book? Or what can I, some of the authors say, what can I do to write a book that you'll love? And I have a very true but very unsatisfying answer, which is I have this moment when I'm reading a manuscript. It's happening to me right now. While I'm today we'll finish reading a short story collection that I will make an offer on, where I stop reading as an editor. For the most part, the editor is always there a little bit on my shoulder with her red pen in hand, ready to make a few notes. But when I am mostly stop wanting to put my hands in the manuscript and move things around, and I start reading it as an admirer, as a fan. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, there's so much richness here. There's so much that I am excited to share with other readers. That's when I know that I want to make an offer on a book.
This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator here in the Audio Garden with Diane Goettel, the Executive Director of Black Lawrence Press. Still coming up, I'll ask her about their latest titles. You also have several contests. You've won an award for being one of those good contests for people to submit to. How important is that to your small press as an indie publishing press? How important is the whole contest um, model to you, and how important do you think it is extending outward to the whole model of just independent book publishing?
Yeah, I really think that the contests are a win-win. Certainly there is only ever one winner, although we do sometimes select finalists for publication as well. If there was a finalist that we just had a very hard time letting go of, and we just wanted to make sure that we kept it under our wing. Um, when we run a contest, the contest fees ensure a few things. They ensure that we will have funds on hand to produce the book. And also, there is usually at least a little bit of profit, which goes into the activities of the press. As a small press, we are two things. We're a small business, and we're a small business in the arts. Those are two things that are challenging to maintain. And so having something like a contest that does turn a bit of a profit is very, very helpful. But then I really do think, that Black Lawrence Press, we've been around for 20 years. My understanding is that we have a pretty solid reputation. And so I think that it can be quite helpful to an author to win a contest. We've had many authors win contests with us and go on to, continue to publish and have wonderful, illustrious careers. We've had authors tell us, I was having a really hard time on the academic job market, and then I got, a contract with you and won a prize, and that seemed to turn the heads of a few people in hiring committees. So I do think that it really can be quite helpful for authors' careers.
And so I was looking at your website. You recently announced the winner of the big Moose Prize, I think it was, and you have some finalists yet to be determined as well. Would you like to tell us about that?
That's right. So, Cyan, Magenta, Yellow, Black is the title of this year's Big Moose Prize winner by Kevin Fenton. It is set in the 90s in Minneapolis and is about a graphic designer set adrift. And he finds himself in a support group of people with very, very different reasons for being in the support group. It reminds me a little bit of Nick Hornby. And I kind of, the characters are so very real in this book that there'd be times that I'd be, brushing my teeth or walking my dog, and I think about a scene, and I'd be like, "Is that somebody?" I try to, is that a conversation I had with somebody, or was that a television
An
show?
actual
No, no, it's
memory
in the
or a
manuscript.
story?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and right now we're in the final stages of reading for the Hudson Prize. The Hudson Prize is an annual prize that's open for both short story collections and poetry collections. Well, pardon me, actually, it's open to prose collections and poetry collections. People would
Mhm.
ask us, they'd say, my short stories are autobiographical, or would you consider essays? And we said, let's just open it to prose because that's really what we'd love to see all of it.
So you have a wide definition then of prose.
We do. And so we announced the finalists a few weeks ago. We're in the very finishing stages of picking a winner. And one of the very most fantastic parts of my job is getting to call an author and let them know that they have won a prize. I always do that by phone call. Um,
I'm
and
looking forward to something like that happening to me one day. But writers have to believe in themselves in this what as you said, it's a tough landscape. If you get 7,000 submissions, even if like 1,000 of them were great, you could never publish all those 1,000 submissions, right?
Another thing that I'll note about that is um, there are many times that authors will send us a manuscript and it gets quite close, and we let them know. We let them know you got into, the last 10% or the last 5% of manuscripts that we're looking at. Please think of us again. And 18 months later, they send us the manuscript, and boy, did they get it right, right? It needed some revising. It needed some polishing. Maybe there were a couple of darling poems that they needed to take out.
Mm.
And there are lots of times that we publish manuscripts that have come to us maybe a second or even a third time.
So we've talked about contests, but what about other ways that you acquire books to your catalog?
Sure. So we have open reading periods, both in June and November for the full month. And during the open reading periods, we accept submissions across 9 categories. That includes chapbooks and full length titles of various lengths. And then it also includes anthology submissions, proposals for anthologies.
Aha, so editors out there might like to think about that as well. Do you talk to agents?
Agents do occasionally submit work to us. We are usually not worth an agent's time,
Mhm.
unless an agent is really, really sort of getting into the weeds with their author and really trying to help them get their career started. The kind of work that we publish and the scale at which we publish we're not usually attractive to agents, just because, I'll be quite frank. The biggest royalty check I've ever written was a little over $1,000, right? Sometimes, especially for a book that's on the backlist, a royalty check might be $50. Might be if the book is
Mm,
15 years old, it might be
okay.
$5, right? We've only sold a couple of copies, and those numbers just are not interesting to agents who take between 10 and 15%. What agents will often do is if their author has a book that could be a good first book, but not necessarily the kind that could be sold to one of the big 5 publishers, they'll say, send this to a strong small press. Get your start, and then we will think about your next book. So they send their experimental fiction chapbook to us, and then they publish their novel with Simon and Schuster, something like that. And that has happened quite a few times to many of our authors.
So in some sense, you've functioned as a sort of stepping stone along a kind of twisted stairway up to maybe getting into one of those big five, which is kind of a, not the brightest landscape for writers or independent publishers. So let's get the word out here on the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. What are you offering this season?
Well, I'm very excited about a book that has just come out. It is called Us from Nothing, a poetic history. This is actually an advanced reader's copy, but we do have finished copies that just came in this week. It's by Jeff Bouvier, and it is the entire history of our world in prose poems.
That looks like a slim volume to accomplish that.
It is. It's an ambitious project. It also feels very complete, and so it's an incredibly thoughtful book. And I love the economy of language that is in this book. I'll read you one blurb that I think is really perfect.
Please do.
This is from Patrick Madden. Jeff Bouvier has written a tour through physics and biology and language and art and mathematics and sociology to the point where such categorizations fall away into meaninglessness and everything becomes again one. This book, like all great books, reframes reality, imagines unbelievable true stories, and by doing so creates for us a richer way of apprehending the world. And so that's Us from Nothing by Jeff Bouvier, fresh out from Black Lawrence Press. Another recent book that I think really deserves a lot of attention is Mamas, Martyrs, and Jezebels, Myths, Legends, and Other Lies You've Been Told About Black Women. And this was edited by 4 PhDs with different points of view, different academic interests, and it's essays from African-American women across the United States. It says, I'll read a blurb for this one, if that's okay as well.
Yes,
this
please.
Is from Bettina Judd. This book of thoughtful offerings, essays, reflections, playlists, and interviews reflect with incredible depth Black women's lived experiences. Here, the complexity of personhood, embodiment, intellectual life, and emotional and spiritual worlds are taken up with a personal and collective eye. These authors have much to say, and in the tradition of canonical Black feminist edited collections, their words will reverberate for generations. That's Mamas, Martyrs, and Jezebels.
We look forward to reading some of those. And I thank you so much for your time here in the Audio Garden on the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. How can people find out more about Black Lawrence Press, your catalog, and even buy your books?
So the best place to start is blacklawrencepress.com. That has everything. It also goes over a number of the programs that we have. We do free writing workshops once a month. We have manuscript consultation services. We have an entire page dedicated to resources for writers. So blacklawrencepress.com is a really good place to start. We're also very, very active on social media. So if you follow Black Lawrence on Twitter, otherwise known as X, Facebook, Instagram, you'll be able to see our recent collections that are coming out. You'll be able to see sales that we have going on and hear about all the places that we are popping up across the U.S., maybe somewhere near you.
Well, thank you for that, Diane, and thank you so much for your time here with us today. That's blacklawrencepress.com. I've been speaking with Diane Goettel, the executive director and really the editor as well of Black Lawrence Press. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Martha, and thank you to all of the listeners for Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. It's been delightful to be here with you.
Thanks again to Diane Goettel for joining us here in the Audio Garden for the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers, talking about Black Lawrence Press. And for me, it's more than just fun to speak with so many talented and creative people while we have this time together. It's inspirational too, and I have learned so much since we started with season 1. Now, coming up on the end part of season 2 of this show, and we welcome new listeners from around the country who may be tuning in for the first time here by way of the Pacifica Affiliate Network. Eileen Tabios was here a week or two ago, and while she was here, I had a chance to talk with her about her experiences with book banning.
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Once it's heard, it can't be unheard. Once it's published, it's not going to be unpublished. Once you read the poem, you can't unread it. No matter how an individual may try to push it to the side, forget about it, it's still in there. And it's the words, the meaning, the feelings behind it are taking root in their psyche, and they can't get rid of it.
By Sarah J. This book is gay by Juno Dawson.
The banning of books itself reflects probably larger problems in our country. When I look at the problems, I tend to look more at the problems that end up manifesting themselves in banning books. I think people are trying to force people to think in a certain way, or they have biases against certain types of people, which manifests itself in banning certain types of publications. I've got this miniature book collection of some of the banned books from the past, from Slaughterhouse-Five, Song of Solomon, Fahrenheit 451, Black Beauty, and it's all created into this box of banned books. But when you take out the books, these are not actually miniature books, but they're matchboxes. So that whole metaphor of putting the books on fire, is all in that.
Thank you, Eileen Tabios, for those comments about banning books. We would welcome your comments as well, and you can make those by visiting listenandbeheard.net. You could send us an email, or you can record a message for us. Eileen Tabios, she'll be coming back. I recently had a conversation with her and Diane Goettel, and also Kate McMullen and Annie Groover from Hub City Publishing and Bookshop about the closure back in April of 2024 of small press distribution, which was a dramatic event for writers and publishers alike across the country, as they were distributing for more than 300 indie presses. That will be coming up sometime in October. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to talk with some self-published authors who were at the monthly market of authors and artisans at As the Page Turns bookstore in Travelers Rest. And also, we're going to welcome back Professor Jonathan Storm to give you some more information about his book, The Field Guide to the Southern Piedmont, and also to share some of what we see and talk about along the path of the audio garden. So please enjoy yourself for a few moments. Wander around in the sounds of the audio garden. I'm going to go check on the chickens, and I'll meet you on the other side of that bridge. This is Listen and Be Heard Radio, wlbh.org. This is the Listen and Be Heard hour for readers and writers, and we would like to hear from you if you have an opinion to express or some thoughts about what you've heard or are about to hear during this hour that we have together in the audio garden. You can visit our website at listenandbeheard.net and fill out a form, find our phone number, get in touch. Leave us a recorded message. Give us permission to play it on the air. I went to the September market of As the Page Turns bookstore in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and spoke with local authors about their books and how they publish them. Some had small press publishers, and others were handling all the business themselves. Here's a sampling of some of our conversations about do-it-yourself publishing. For more information about them and their books, you can visit Season 2, Episode 30 at listenandbeheard.net. I'm here now at the table of Sarah Chapman, who has written a novel called Between the Lines. Would you like to tell us about it, Sarah?
Sure, I would love to. It's a contemporary romance. I would say if you're a romance reader, it's about a 3 on the spice scale. The tropes are second chance, childhood friends to lovers. It's set in Asheville, and most importantly for me, it has type 1 diabetes representation. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I never see that portrayed accurately in the media, so it was really important to me to write it myself and get it out there and help educate people in like a fun way.
Very interesting. And I never heard of like a spice scale for romance novels. Sure. Is that a thing?
Sure. Yes, it is. Like if you read a lot of romance, that's so a 1 on the spice scale is like they just kiss, where a 5 is like they almost never have clothes on. So I'm like right in the middle where there's one scene that is not appropriate for children to read, let's say.
Okay, well, thank you for the heads up about that. Now, is this your first novel?
It is. Yeah, I've been writing since I was 10 years old, which don't worry about how long ago that was. But I wrote my first novel on American Girl stationery when I was 10 years old. And I finally got around to publishing something. So I'm very, very excited, very proud.
And how did you get it published? Did you self-publish or did you find a publisher?
I self-published. I tried to go the traditional publishing route, and contemporary romance isn't selling to the big publishers right now. So I was like, well, it's ready to go. I don't need to wait. I can do it myself.
And so how has that experience been for you?
It's actually been really positive. I've had a lot of support from other writers. I've been able to have complete control over my work. Like I did the editing, I made the cover myself, like I'm doing all the marketing, and all the money goes to me too. So it's been great. People have been really supportive.
So authors as business people, that's the sort of the vibe I'm getting while I'm going around talking to all these authors here. I would say more of them are self-published than finding traditional publishers.
I have a friend who has traditional published with a contemporary romance, and she, after seeing my experience, has decided she's going to self-publish going forward. So a lot of people, like, it's more control. You don't have to worry about the industry and other people wanting to buy it and make money off of it. Like, you get to be the champion of your own work completely.
So how can people find out more about you and buy your book?
You can go to sararchapman.com, and that is Sarah with an H, or I'm on Instagram at the Sarah R. Chapman.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your spending a little time here on Listen to Be Heard Radio.
Thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciated it.
I am at the table of Jason E. Fort, who is the author of many books sitting on this table. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about all these books that are on this table?
Yes, ma'am. So I started out writing what I call Christian thrillers. A lot of times it focuses on or goes around a story about assassins and how people stop them. And then, of course, that somehow led to me writing biblical and historical fiction. But I also write family memoirs, and so family history is very important to my family. And since I'm the only writer in the family, that job kind of falls on me. So I write a lot of different stuff. Oh, and I also have small town suspense stories as well.
Okay, and you were telling me that you also, I think you were telling me that you work full time and you have a lot of other things that you do. So why and how did you get into writing books?
So I've always had a lot to say, and I like to tell stories, and I always wanted to write a book, probably ever since I saw the movie Lord of the Rings. I didn't like reading or writing growing up, so my dad always found irony in the fact that I started self-publishing books. Well,
that's very interesting. So tell me, since you didn't like it so much, how did you learn the craft?
A lot of experimenting. I actually started writing poetry, and that kind of came naturally to me. I was actually told by a college professor that my poetry was pretty good, and I was inspired to write more poetry when my son was born. That led into short story writing and other ventures.
Okay, well, I'd like to read some of the titles on this table. There's Misguided, Mistaken, and Some Wars Never End, While Our Brothers Were Away. That was not even half of the titles sitting on this table. If people want to find out more about you and your books, how can they do that?
The easiest way is to just go to www.jason-e-fort.com.
Well, thank you very much for talking with me today, Jason.
Yes, ma'am. You have a great day.
You too, thank you. And now I am walking over to speak with Kelsey Annan, is that correct?
Kelsey Annan, yes, you're correct.
And you have written a novel called Delusions. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So I wrote this novel, Daisies of Delusions, when I...
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the title wrong. Daisies of Delusions.
So Daisies of Delusions is a book about a girl named Demi that is in a small town of Lafayette, Indiana, and she is coming back from college and has had a traumatic past. It's kind of a thriller, and her dad's coming out of prison soon, and so she's going to have to deal with that conflict, and yeah, you'll have to read the rest.
And is this your first novel?
Yes, it is my first novel.
And so why did you decide to write this novel, and how difficult, did you study writing, or is this something new for you?
So I used to be a teacher, so it kind of came from when I was teaching a poetry unit in second grade. It just kind of sparked something in me, and I just wanted to keep writing, and this is what came out of it. So I started out with poetry and then ended up with this idea for the novel, and that's where it came from.
And did you look for a publisher, or is this self-published?
I self-published through Amazon.
And how have you found that to be? Has it been a good experience for you? Do you think you want to self-publish another book, or would you like to find a traditional publisher next time?
Yeah, I found self-publishing fairly easy. I mean, it was difficult to figure out the programs and stuff just because I was doing it somewhat alone, but I found some authors that kind of helped walk me through it, and I'll probably self-publish again if I write another novel. I'm actually working on a sequel, so that'll probably be through Amazon as well.
So, Daisies of Delusions by Kelsey Annan, and people can find that on Amazon. Can they find out more about you anywhere else than Amazon?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram. My handle is whimsicalwisdoms_by-Kels, and you can find me on Instagram.
Well, thank you for spending a little time talking about your book today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I am at the table of Judy Bush, who is the author of Envy to Death, Venom, Fatal Revenge, and Provoked to Kill. Did you self-publish these books, or did you find publishers for them?
No, I self-published. I'm an indie author, and I found my cover artist online with Fiverr.com. And that has worked out very well for me. Thank you.
And how can people find out more about you and purchase your books?
That they can come here to the bookstore as the page turns in Traveler's Rest. They can find me on Amazon as well.
And do you have any social media or website page or something that people could follow?
Yes, I do have a website. It's www.judybush, and that's JUDYBUCH.com.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Those were a few of the authors who I got to speak to at the Author and Artisan Market at As the Page Turns Bookstore in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. I'm going to bring you a few more next week, focusing on the ones who were bringing us local, regional stories, and there were some very interesting ones. So I hope you'll come back for that, and there's also more information about all of the authors. I didn't get to play all of them for you, but you'll find more at listenandbeheard.net, and this is Season 2, Episode 30. I had so much fun learning in the field from Professor Storm last week, one of the authors of the free Field Guide to the Southern Piedmont. And now I'm excited because here he is again, brimming with more information.
So we're back further in the woods now, and you can see that in the past couple of years we've created a series of sort of analog beaver dams to back up the spring water a little bit, and we've created where there used to just be a little trickle of water, really, a little pond area. And the goats have recently kind of cleared this area. And so now, like, what might we expect to be the next phase here?
Well, so you've got water backed up here. You've cleared out some of the vegetation. The goats can help to clear out some of those invasive species. You've got a shady habitat. You've got some water nearby. So something that I would expect to see in shady and moist habitat would be ferns, which we've got a nice population of going right there. So things that are shady and moist, ferns love habitats like that. So I would expect to see some more of those, but also some spring wildflowers might come into here. You might see spring beauties and other wildflowers coming up in early spring.
I think I've identified Carolina allspice, and of course there's the magnolia trees.
Southern magnolia?
Yes,
yep.
I believe there's southern magnolia.
So one of the magnolias that's very common around here is southern magnolia. It's not technically native to this part of the southeastern U.S. It's more of a Gulf Coast species, but it's been planted all over across the eastern U.S. And you'll find it often in the woods where it has escaped from yards, but certainly native to the eastern U.S., just not this part of the eastern U.S.
I see. So that's another thing that I'm being schooled on today, because I assumed that it was actually native to here, as well as the crepe myrtle tree. I saw so many crepe myrtles all around that I assumed it was native.
Yep, so crepe myrtle is from Asia, very common in the horticultural industry. You find it in people's yards, you find them in parking lots, around box stores that are put up in towns and cities, but it's not native here to the eastern U.S., it's native to Asia. So the challenge with them is if you put a lot of things like crepe myrtle out into the environment, you're not providing food for the caterpillars of moths and butterflies and any other sort of insect that's adapted to feed on those leaves. And of course that's the foundation of a big part of our food web are those invertebrates that feed on the leaves of trees and then feed the things higher up in the trophic levels, in the food chain.
So back here in the woods, we up in this area is pretty wild. I haven't really spent that much time like trying to go up in there. There's still a lot of brambles and trees fallen from a storm that must have been quite a while ago now. But I have observed, I think because of that, a lot of wildlife and a lot of different kinds of birds. I actually think I saw a dove yesterday. And we've also had wild turkeys.
Yeah. So habitat like this were near people, but kind of off in the woods, near some open fields, finding a mourning dove would not be uncommon. So you may hear them calling and cooing in the mornings or in the evenings. Wild turkeys, they like these wooded habitats. They can also come near people around yards. So that wouldn't be surprising at all.
And also great blue herons and red hawks. And I do believe I've seen an eagle. I could be wrong about that.
There could be a bald eagle around, yeah. So their numbers have recovered greatly since the banning of DDT. But eagles, yeah, sure, a bald eagle could be around.
And what about a cougar?
So we don't have, you're thinking mountain lions here with cougars. Very unlikely. There's lots of reports of people seeing cougars. We don't have them in the wild here in the eastern U.S. other than the Florida panthers down in Florida. So if you did see one, it would be one that escaped captivity from somebody. But we haven't had cougars here in the eastern U.S. for many, many decades.
Okay, and I do know also that we hear, I think there's probably like packs of coyotes roaming around as well.
Yeah, so hearing coyotes would be, I would expect that in a habitat like this. We're near people, we're near woodlands and open fields. Coyotes are very adapted to a wide range of habitats, and they can live around people very easily. They're well adapted to being around us. What we want to do to not create a problem with the coyotes is not leave out trash or food sources that can attract the coyotes to come close to us, get rid of that fear of being around people, because that's when you get the problems of them being around your house and maybe going after a cat or a dog that you let outside for a second. We've got to be responsible with our environment and not creating problem coyotes.
So we want to kind of maintain that relationship between like keeping things wild and what we have to, and protecting what we consider domestic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you want the coyotes to have some fear of humans, so they don't see us as a food resource or something to come up close to, because they've lost that fear of us, and that's where you get the problems a lot of times.
And I guess that's the same message about black bears.
Exactly, yeah, the same thing. We don't want them to see us as a food resource to come up to our house and look around to see if you left some meat out on the grill or your trash cans are out tonight. That's when you get problems.
Professor Storm, I want to thank you so much for spending a little time with me here in the audio garden. Your book is available for free to the public, and we'll have that link on our website for people. I think you also use it as a textbook for your classes?
Yes, I do. So I teach a course at USC Upstate on Southern Piedmont natural history, and I just take students out. We talk about whatever we see that day or hear that day off in the woods or wherever we're hiking, and that's a resource that they can use to identify species and try to figure out what they're finding on their own walks out in the woods.
Well, it's certainly a resource that I think people can really appreciate for its depth and breadth of information. Is there some message that you would like to convey to our audience of readers and writers that maybe I didn't give you an opportunity to say?
So what I would say is, as much as you can, spend some time outside. Be observant and see what you find out there out in nature. What do you hear? And then try to figure out what that is. It's a great joy to hear some new insect or some new bird. And then once you figure out what it is, you have that greater connection to the world around you and a greater appreciation of your natural environment.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're almost at the end of our hour together here in the audio garden, and I have been enjoying myself so much that the time has just flown right by. But we're not quite there to the end. Before we go, I'd like to give you a little preview of a conversation that Tony Robles had with Vince Gotera, and which we will bring to you next week.
The thing about the MFA is that it can save you a lot of time and effort. It is possible, obviously, to become a great writer without getting an MFA. But the advantage of the MFA, program is that it brings together people who are searching to become writers. And so in an MFA program, you're in a community of like-minded people, and that helps to develop your own work, especially because you will see, in the workshop, you'll see that the things that you're working on are often the same thing that others are working on, and you can see how they are solving those problems, and you can apply that to your own work. I was searching around in the school library one day, and I discovered this writer, Andre Norton, next to Mary Norton, and I didn't know that she was one of the most prolific and very popular science fiction novelists and short story writers, of that time. And then that got me hooked, and I still remember the first book, the first science fiction book I read, which was Star Rangers by Andre Norton. I can still see the title, I can still see the cover in my mind's eye. And that got me, that really led directly to where I am now. Bakunawa the sea dragon desires the 7 moons in high heaven. I look around my kingdom, blue and black and glorious. Water flows through all my doors, while my eyes pierce the darkness. Schools of fish swirl like spirals of glinting light in the distance. I often swim up to the surface of the water and point my snout towards the heavens. Up there in the firmament, I glimpse against the sea of bright points of light the faraway stars, 7 spheres gleaming in the night. Every time I do this, the number of spheres differs, sometimes just 2 or 3, other times 6 or 7. These moons glimmer in different shapes, from curving slivers to crescents full of roundness. I hunger for them. Below the surface, I feast on whales and massive clouds of shrimp, but there is nothing like the 7 spheres in my domain. During the day, there is the glory of the one sun when it rules the sky. The sun is too hot to eat, but when the sun has gone away each night, the 7 moons shed their delicious light, and I want to eat them. I will launch myself into the star-riddled sky, eat all 7 moons.
Thank you so much for spending the hour with me here in the audio garden. Please let your voice be heard by visiting us at listenandbeheard.net or by calling 864-397-5748. Share your thoughts about this program, banning books, a book you're reading. Our guests today were Diane Goettel, Executive Director of Black Lawrence Press, authors from the Author and Artisan Market at As the Page Turns Bookstore in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and Professor Jonathan Storm. Our featured poet was Michael Collonese, reading at the Brandy Bar in Hendersonville, North Carolina, recorded by Tony Robles. Next week, we will welcome Vince Katera, Poet Laureate of the State of Iowa, to the Audio Garden. I am your host and producer, Martha Senator. My co-host is Tony Robles, Associate Producer, DJ Jeannie Hopper, editing by Jeremiah Cothran, music by J. Rodriguez Sierra. The band book theme is by DJ Jeannie Hopper with the voice and words of Yvette Murray, whose latest book is Hush, Puppy, published by Finishing Line Press. Thanks as always to Davine Dial for introducing the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers to the broadcast airwaves on WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. and to KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas, and KHOI in Ames, Iowa, among others, for airing our weekly show in your community.
Living it, giving it, having it, taking it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is sewing a coat, investing each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is tangible. It's being a rock in the river and being the river too. It's hearing, you'll never be able to do that. Living it is knowing you will do it. It's speaking the unspoken. It's thinking the unthinkable. It's doing the unexpected. It's quitting before you get fired. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is loving a man you're not supposed to love. It's giving way to emotions, creating commotions, calling attention to yourself, and eye contact. Living it is learning from someone who can actually show you. It's cleaning your teacher's house or helping her to find one. It's never ever saying J-O-B. Living it is a one-way ticket and no solid plans. It's smoking a J in a smoke cafe in Amsterdam. It's saying the day is pretty in a strange new city. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is having nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's putting all of your charms and attributes, every single one of them, to good use. It's knowing the kindness of strangers and love for sale.